keeping with wide receivers, right? I think we're onto that part of the roster now. And, it's the big question. You could see and make arguments for this team carrying five, six, or seven wide receivers, I think. Um, Five is probably a tough sell for most people. I don't think that a lot of people think that. Um, but I think that if they wanted to go heavier somewhere else, and they thought their guys were good enough, you could see it. I mean, I think people will say that they don't have, five that are good enough to carry the load and they would need a six. And I would kind of agree with that as well. But what do you think? I guess we'll start with Shoop maybe, or just give us, I guess, top three. Let's all go through. I think we have the same top three, I would assume, right?
Yeah, I mean, mine pretty simple. There's Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, and I mean Keon Coleman. I guess would be that third one that's locked in
Exactly.
100%.
That's what I was thinking. Yep.
And then I do think there are two other, or at least one other lock, but maybe two other locks. But those are guys that I could also see arguments for. But to me, they're locks. But those I think would be the three that I thought maybe you guys would have would be Coleman, Samuel, and Shakir.
Yep. I have those same three. I don't really see how that changes unless someone has a crazy good camp or there's an injury, God forbid. But yeah, I think those three will be our first three. And who knows if all three will be out on the field first snap of the first game, given how much two tight end stuff we're going to run, which we'll get into when we talk about them. But yeah, those three will probably be our X, Y, and Z when the season starts out.
I do, though. I will say might be the only one. I know we've been talking about this as well. Overall, I do actually have seven here. I do have seven that they are keeping. My one guy that might get cut, which we'll get to later, might be a little bit surprising. But there's one guy that I know I said to you guys before the show that really is on the edge for me, and I just don't know what they're going to do with him. So I do have them keeping him, which I won't say yet, but I just want to say after those top three, I think maybe the other three that you guys might have, which are more popular names than this. Matt Collins, he got brought in. Chase Claypool has been, apparently looking pretty good, rejuvenated, maybe a little bit of a better mindset now than he had years past. And then MVS, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's been on winning teams before. He's a veteran. I think he's going to be a guy there. So those are my top six. And then the seventh guy, I'll wait till if you guys even have him on your list at all.
Yeah, I was just looking, and I apologize for kind of going back and forth a little bit, but I was just looking for the poll I put up on the brand page a little bit ago on June 15th on what people thought the roster construction would be for the wide receiver position. And I listed seven wide receivers with zero fullbacks. So maybe that was the iteration. I could have put, zero fullbacks or maybe eight offensive linemen. Maybe that caveat would have got people. Not many people wanted to cut Reggie Gilliam there. Well, six wide receiver, one fullback, which was over 50% of the people. And then 28.5% said five wide receivers with a fullback and an extra O lineman or RB. So that was interesting. I thought that got nearly 30% of the vote. So I am going to agree a little bit with the six wide receiver just because I think they can't rely on the same. I think it would be unwise to rely maybe on the same luck at offensive line as they had last year, and to maybe not have that depth. It's a crapshoot. I guess you can go either way, but saying that Gilliam makes it for me then brings me to having six, and those are Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Matt Collins, MVS, and Justin Shorter are the six that I have on the Bills roster this year.
Yeah, I also think it's going to be six receivers. I kind of, like you said earlier, lean to keeping maybe an extra O lineman. I believe last year they only kept eight. think this year they might keep 9 because, like you said, you can't rely on the same offensive line to start all 17 games like they did last year. And there's some new pieces on the O-line this year. McGovern trying to slide into that center position. David Edwards maybe being a full-time starter for the first time in his career. We got some rookies that they drafted, who are probably going to make the team. So I could see them staying heavy on the O-line side just because there may be a little bit more moving pieces there. But yeah, so I think it's most likely going to be 6 receivers. We already talked about the first 3. Matt Collins and MVS, I think, are pretty close to roster locks. And then for the 6th guy, it comes down to that kind of laundry list of everybody else you got. I think right now, if it was, we roll the ball out and play tomorrow, Chase Claypool is probably that 6th guy. But I do not think that he has much of a advantage over maybe like a Justin Shorter, who was one of the top receiver recruits coming out of high school. Had a disappointing career at Florida, but he's like a big body receiver, similar to Claypool, who can go up and get the ball, and he's a little bit younger, so maybe that helps him out. And they have to like what they saw from him when he was healthy at the beginning last year, because they kept him the whole year, and they still have him this year. They could have just cut bait and brought in someone else. So I think Shorter and Claypool are battling for that last position. Right now, I'm leaning Claypool. And then you got, the speed guys like Isabella, Hamler, guys like that, who I would be very surprised if they made the roster, but probably more likely to be practice squad guys. And if it is Claypool over Shorter, I would like to see Shorter on the practice squad, unless, someone else gives him a shot. Maybe somewhere else they're not as deep as wide receiver. But it'd be really interesting to see what they do at that position. It's not quite as locked up as it's been in years past. The household names, like we said, aren't there anymore. Diggs, Davis, going to be kind of more receiver by committee. So everybody, I think, will get meaningful snaps of those 6 guys that we keep, just because they're going to be rotated in and out so much.
Yeah, my number 7 was Justin Shorter. He was the guy that I'm going back and forth on. If I did keep 6, I would kind of be as similar as you, Scott. I'm back and forth between Claypool and Shorter, but I would lean Claypool just based off experience, just based off what we're kind of already hearing. I know training camp hasn't started yet, but I would lean that way. But I think they end up keeping both. And then I think, KJ Hamler, I think, goes to the practice squad. And I think actually Xavier Johnson goes to the practice squad, maybe over Andy Isabella. So those are my 2 practice squad guys. But out of the laundry list of, Shavers, Thompson, I could see them keeping 3 receivers on the practice squad for all we know. But yeah, that's kind of a little mixed there. So, but right now I have Xavier Johnson and then KJ Hamler as my practice squad. But yeah, my 7, Shakir, Samuel, Holland, Shorter, Claypool, Coleman, and MVS. So those are my 7 for receivers. And it did unfortunately come at a cost. So we'll be getting to that shortly, though, for who my guy that might have gotten the weird end of the stick there when it comes to the roster configuration.
Yeah, roster construction is definitely a challenge. So I think that when you play this numbers game, and you want to add one somewhere, you got to take one away elsewhere, and everyone thinks differently. Where they value me watching a lot more offensive line, I kind of value having that extra interior guy, or wanting to have that extra big guy to step in if they need, because when they talk about all offseason so far, their commitment to running the ball this year and talking about, being physical and things, that also lends itself to, more guys missing some time. For me, in my mind, I just want to be able to have that security along the line rather than having that be deeper at wide receiver, because Roy brings up a good point in the comments here. We do have 2 tight ends and 2 running backs, really 3 running backs. Honestly, I don't know which 2 Roy was talking about, but all 3 of our running backs really are weapons in the passing game here. If I'm talking about Cook, Davis, and Johnson, the people that we kept, on the roster here. So that does lend itself to make me cut it at 6 even, but I'm not sure I can go down to 5, because I'm not sure where you would actually add that other piece in. I wouldn't really necessarily want to carry 4 running backs and 5 receivers. But, that does get you an extra offensive lineman, maybe. Maybe could give you somewhere if you need something on defense. If you want to keep maybe 11 defensive linemen now, and we'll get into that the defense side of the ball next week on next week's show. But if you want to keep 11 defensive linemen, yeah, you may have to keep 5 wide receivers and think that, okay, well, we got tight ends and running backs that are going to be these pass catching options. So it's very interesting from Roy. I think that's really good.